Yeah, hello and welcome to a new episode of our weekly Spielworxx chat season 2. My name is Uli Blennemann, but I'm having a guest today. It is the wonderful Jonny Peck Cantin. So, Jonny, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
So, I'm really glad and pleased that you are here because it's early over there. I think the time difference is 9 hours, so I'm really glad that you are here and thank you for taking your time, Johnny. And for the viewers, if you have questions and comments, please post them in the chat window. Johnny may even answer, so I'm pretty sure.
Oh,
And hello, Chris. Good seeing you. And he's welcoming you as well. So Chris from the UK is already watching. Johnny, let us immediately start. When did you start gaming? So can you remember?
well, as far as serious gaming, I suppose it was in the mid 2000s when I was introduced to Euro games, things like Catan, Ticket to Ride, and Carcassonne was my favorite, and all that. So it was around then, and as a kid, I enjoyed board games quite a bit at a traditional basic board games that you'd expect. And then my favorite actually as a kid was Ravensburger's amazing Labyrinth
Ah,
game with the little shifting maze.
yes. Hmm.
I had a friend that had that when I was, it was 1986, 87. I had that, and I just was so fascinated with that. So we might say that was my first Euro game since it was a proper German game, and I think that's what led to my enjoyment of uh, Carcassonne so many years later because the similar little tile thing and all that, and it brought back some certain feeling to me, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. I love how it's just sprays turning into this art thing, or like the way the maze shifts in that game. So it's mostly that. I don't have a big background in things like Magic the Gathering or role playing
Hmm.
games or anything really up to that point. It's kind of like games as a kid, and then a long period of just art and music and other things, and all of a sudden Euro games, and I've kind of stuck that way all the way till now, really.
Yeah, interesting. And then I also still somewhere over there is Das verrückte Labyrinth, so the German edition
Hmm.
of that one, and it is a fascinating game, and the rules are so simple, so it has all this classic Ravensburger feeling here in
Hmm.
Germany. And we have some other people here. So there's designer Matt Wolf, and he's commenting
Hey,
on that you are up that early. Johnny probably hasn't gone to bed yet, so could be
yeah,
true. And
I did
Jay,
sleep. I did sleep.
so Johnny slept at least a little bit. So Jay Foolsgard is saying hello, and then there is designer Matthew Dunstan, and I think
Oh,
Matthew,
cool.
and he's saying hi, and I think he's right now in the Czech Republic, right? Matthew, you are still at Prague, I think, and Mo Canales from Texas. So there is yeah, an international crew right here.
That's
But
great.
Johnny, when you started, we call it now serious gaming. Did you have a local group? Did you play uh, with whom did you play?
Yeah, so interesting. I'm kind of from a broken family where I've got a half brother on one side and that sort of thing. And I was introduced to Euro games from him. He's an older brother, it's
Hmm.
10 years older. And then on the other side of the family, which he's not a part of, my dad is actually was really into Euro games and has a friend back in the 90s. They were importing German games and getting the translations and doing it kind of that way. Um, and so they were showing me these things. So on the weekends or whenever holidays, I'd get to play those. And eventually, once I was addicted, I started to buy some of my own, and that's where I became a little bit pushy with my friends. I'd be, "Come on over, let's play a game. I got this game. You got to see this." And so I started to host little game nights at my art gallery at the time. And then
Hmm.
I also was just checking local meetups and trying to find who else is already into this stuff, and found a few people, and I still play with some of those people to this day. But yeah, I've definitely had to create the scene a little bit for where I'm at because I'm kind of a small town sort of a thing. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not just like you go to a really hip game cafe where there's lots of stuff happening, which there's more of now. But back then it was really about creating the environment to play the games, and once or twice a week, and sometimes doing all the game days on Saturdays or every Wednesday, that kind of thing. So yeah, so definitely I was known as the nerd herder about 10 years ago. So for getting everybody together.
Mhm. But this is wonderful, getting gamers together at the table. It doesn't have to be a hip cafe, it's just having a good time. So I really like this. But then, of course, you make the next step. Lots of people, as we know, play games, and lots of people think they can design a game, but very few people really make it, so become a designer. So was there a single decision, a single moment where you thought, now I can design a game, I can improve on something? Or how did this happen, Johnny?
It's funny because I didn't really think of it. I'm kind of a creative person, so if I get involved in something, a lot of times the creative part of me just fires up. And people would ask me, "Oh, you should make these games. You have this great collection." And I'd be like, "Oh, no, it's too much math, or there's all these things going on I couldn't really understand." And and I was mostly focused on visual arts, music, and things. And it wasn't really until I met some game designers and I saw that the games weren't they're broken. They're early games, and that for whatever reason that just it was a little unexpected for me. I kind of felt like when you see so many games, they're just like these crystalline, perfect things that been somebody thought of in their head, and all of a sudden, ta-da, there it is. And sometimes it happens with songs. It's like, oh, I wrote this one night after da da da, and it's just there and it's done, and it doesn't get any better after that. And sometimes with art, it's that way where they throw a canvas up there and they throw stuff at it, and it's dried and it's done, and it can be a pretty quick process, and it's just there. And a lot of times, I feel like musicians and artists they don't get questioned very much when they reveal their work. So if uh, running the gallery, somebody comes up and brings a big picture and they say, "Here's my picture. I'm gonna put it on your main wall." I go, "Yeah, I'd like you to change that lower corner part because I think it could be more fun." You don't say things like that to artists, and you
Right.
don't tell them change the third verse of your song. And, I like the first verse better. It's it needs to end with a bang. That kind of playtesting critical feedback that you get sometimes doesn't happen in the art music world, outside of maybe like academia where you're going to college for it. And so when I saw that games were just being put together, played, broken, fixed over and over and over again, this iterative process, it was somehow new to me. And that kind of lowered my expectations a little bit about what it takes. It's like, can you make a perfect game out of nowhere? No, but can you make a broken game and work on it for a long time? Maybe. And so I think that gave me a little bit of confidence to at least try something. And that's what started me with kind of tinkering with parts and trying to put a game together and eventually putting a sell sheet together and eventually getting something signed, and then you're down the rabbit hole from there. And it's been kind of a crazy journey actually, but that's how it got started.
Yeah, and talking about that, you signed your first game. Your first game, if I'm correct here, your first published game was Kings of Artifice in 2013.
Mhm.
Why that game, and what do you think about this game today? Is it, do you like looking back at it, or is it like, it could have, I could have done this one a little bit differently, or if I would do it today, or what do you think about it?
I just know Matt Wolf knows the story, so he's probably just sitting there going like, oh. It was kind of a disastrous story. It was kind of heartbreaking, the crazy things that happened with that game, from the innocent beginnings to just a series of just weird and bad events that led to it really not coming out in a good way. It has problems, just there's just missing parts, missing artwork. There's a lot of things wrong with it, so
Okay.
it's not even a matter of um, I can't really look at it in any way and just be like, oh, I don't really want to revisit it. I don't think fixing any of those little problems would have um, made it a better game at this point. And so I had to really walk away from it. And gosh, I don't think I've played it since 2013, something like that. And I don't even own a copy of it, honestly. So it's very, very something I try not to think about much. And my foray into self-publishing was kind of a response to that because I had such a bad time with the people I worked with and the publisher and all that other stuff that this Kickstarter thing was kind of new at the time. Exploding Kittens hadn't come out, and I knew a friend designer who had made $10,000 to make his game, and he did it. And I saw it, and it looked really nice. And I was like, "Wow, that's amazing! You can really get $10,000 to make a game." And he was telling me about minimum print runs and where to source parts in China and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, I think I could put something together. And even if it doesn't take off, the idea would be to learn how this works, how to make a game all the way through, and have something that, if nothing else, would be like a resume piece. I could at least say, it's not perfect, but I made this. And that was a goal, and I think I met that goal. It took 2 years of my life to make my second game. And from there, I decided for sure I wanted to go back to pitching and not to self-publish, but then to have a better understanding of what the process is and how to speak about it more technically instead
Yeah.
of having that kind of oh, I hope I get discovered, I hope it comes out amazing, and almost extending too much trust to other freelancers and
Yes.
people like that.
Yeah.
And so I've been more active, and I think that's what led a little bit to the developer role that I've taken on, is the fact that I wanted to stay involved in projects after that, and I tend to at this point as well. So if I design a game, I tend to also develop the game at this point. I don't know the circumstances that would lead to me being, here's a prototype, let me know when there's a royalty check. Oh, cool. I don't think that's going to happen. So,
And sorry for bringing this story up. I didn't knew that it was something that is still touching you. And Matthew in the chat. And by the way, he's living in Prague right now. And he's saying that's really tough. And so sorry to hear that, Johnny. Yeah, sorry for me. From Uli, sorry for bringing this story up. But Matt is saying the story of that game on the Dice Tower. So he's rubbing this in. On the Dice Tower Now podcast is the wildest tale in board games. So if people are maybe if they look it up, they hear something. And by the way, I will. You are also having your website, and I'm just posting your URL here. So if people want to follow
mhm.
up, they can do so. Um, so, Johnny, do you have a genre of games or a type of games that you particularly enjoy? You hinted on Carcassonne a little bit, but is this something that you really like, or something else?
I do love that game. I was on that 5 games for Doomsday, and that would be the one that, you bring 5 games, and then, at the end of the episode, the card always flies open and everything falls out except for one. And I did pick Carcassonne Big Box to be my kind of desert island game. Um, with that, I think there's things in that game I love is the elegance. I love the aesthetic of it, the way it builds out. Some people who are big fans of that game are become like tile placement junkies. It's like their favorite thing. I like tile placement, but I wouldn't say I'm like my friend Scott Caputo is like the tile placement guy. It's like he just loves that mechanic, and I do like it. But I think what I love about that game, besides what I mentioned, is there's a speculation element in there. It's like, can I finish this thing? Are you going to leave me alone? Is that field going to get bigger? And you're kind of pushing your luck with the deck. You're pushing your luck with what you think the players might let you get away with, the probability of opening up edges of that thing. And that subtle tension that's in an otherwise kind of peaceful family style game, I think is just a fantastic mix. And there's a little bit of luck. You don't know what tiles you're going to get, but you need to be kind of smart about starting things you can finish or making things harder for other people to finish. And so I think that level of speculation is something that I like to see in a lot of games, and it's kind of an invisible thing because you could look at, it's like, oh, you like Carcassonne a lot, you also really like Colosseum a lot, but those games are different. It's like this one's bidding and trading and all this and set collection and this, what's happening there? Well, there's speculation, there's people making valuations on different things you're trying to push for. Can I make the biggest performance? Can I make this big thing? Will it pay off? So I think that that's an underlying thing that I enjoy versus, say, something that I think is becoming popular is like as people trying to solve games like puzzles or,
Yeah,
kind of work their way up like that.
yeah,
And if something is unsolvable because the human element, because of uncertainty about where things could shake out, and it's a relative scale where maybe a game was really really tense but ended up being very low scoring, like the Estates. Sometimes
Hmm.
the winner has a negative score, so it's not about maximizing; it's just about working with that arena. So I
Hmm.
think that's something that really colors how I think about games. Where I go, that's really clever, that's neat, and then I go, well, that's a good puzzle for very smart people to figure out.
Hmm.
And then other games where it's all tension about interplayer stuff. I'm not saying like social deduction, but more like still the Euro games that has
Hmm.
that. Um, that separates, I think, what ends up in say my collection and what doesn't sometimes.
Yeah. Hmm. Very good. And I'm seeing the question, Matthew, here, but I will go to this a little bit later, but I'm already leading to it right now. So, Johnny, you designed a game for the Endless Winter series. Let's put it serious. But the first game, Endless Winter, the base design, let's call it this way, Paleo Americans. That's by
Hmm.
Stan Kordinsky, and you were the developer. And Matthew, you see, I'm leading to your question. So, is the development role something, and you hinted on this, that you are enjoying as much as designing a game? And also, which differences are there designing a game, so wearing the designer hat or cap, or the developer's cap? So what are the differences here?
Well, I think it's a good question. The whole idea of what is a developer in games, and sometimes, in Europe it's more known as the editor,
Mm-hmm.
as I've noticed. It's there's definitely some differences, and then some people say, well, what's the difference between that and say a producer or something? And I think a loose way to look at it would be that a developer is going to be a little bit of a Swiss Army knife, fix it all, do lots of different things to games in different regards for different publishers with different skill sets, but they also need certain creative elements to also be able to add stuff in as needed, or fuse things together that maybe weren't or whatever else, and kind of have a comprehensive knowledge of how some stuff might have worked in other games that you can adjust so that something works in whatever game they've been handed. And I think sometimes it's like a musical accompanist. Sometimes you want to just play the bass line and lay back and just put that bedrock there and really not try to do a lot. And then sometimes you end up being more like an arranger where you need to like bring in the horns and everything else, and you have to do a lot of work to shape that. So one's very passive, and you're just making sure that stays on track, and that works with the art director and graphic design, and the rules are going okay, and you get it out, and you go cool, and you just go check that off. And then
Mm-hmm.
other ones, you get called because it's a red alert.
Yeah.
And because I'm new to this, as just been in the full time doing this for a few years, it's it's something where I've taken a lot of gigs that because they're red alert, they needed somebody quick. And so it wasn't such a process where it's like, oh, well, can we go down the entire phone book? So I would take on some projects that were very challenging and just be like,
Mm.
this game needs to be completely rebuilt. And it's like, oh my gosh, what do we do? When does it need to be done? Well, yesterday. Okay.
Um,
So
but
there's that.
sorry for interrupting, Johnny. I find this extremely interesting here. But if a publisher is saying, we have this design, red alert, it needs to be completely rebuilt, how do you feel about it? Taking the creative work from somebody, and then you're basically ordered to rip it apart and rebuild it. Is this okay? Is this a difficult job for you? How do you see this?
It is hard. So sometimes I like to talk to the designer and make sure how do they feel about it? What do they want to see change? What is sacred to them about the new design? What is the pillars of the design? Try to identify those things because I had such a bad experience with happened with my first
Yeah.
game. I really don't want to be that guy to somebody else. So
Mhm.
I try to identify those things. I try to what I say is like kind of like I don't know, salami tactics where you show them at regular intervals what you're doing,
Mhm.
so that way it won't waste my time or the company's time if we went way down a lane and the designer goes, oh my gosh, that's not my game anymore, what did you
Mhm.
do? We can reverse back. And if I ever hear a designer say something like, ooh, that's really cool, but it's a game, it's not my game. If I hear that, I really feel like we need to roll back and be like,
Yeah.
how can you make this yours again? What can you do? Could you take any of these ideas that we've suggested now, and can you make like a remix out of them with your ideas? Can you put your own spin
Hmm.
on it again? And how would you feel about that? And that works sometimes. And then other designers, they're like ideas people. They just go, I had an idea for a
Yeah.
great game, and here
Yeah.
it is. And they know it's broken, and they're just happy to get signed, and
Yeah.
they expect you to fix it. It's like selling a script to
Yeah.
a movie house or something, and they're just happy with to see what they get, and they're like they just give you a thumbs up every way, and you go, really, okay, you're easy. So it ranges, and my role between the publisher and designer sometimes is very different. Sometimes I'm like representing the designer, and I'm like fighting for their great ideas
Yeah.
against the tides. And other times the designer could be one of those things where they're mostly absent, and I'm working closely with the publisher, and we just send them their periodical updates, make sure that they're okay, and we get the green light and go from there.
Hmm.
So it's definitely something that's on a individual
Individual.
publisher,
Yeah.
individual designer basis, how I fit into that matrix.
Yeah, and now we are getting to Matthew's question finally, and
Hmm.
he's asking, and so it's a question for you, of course. Do you think there could be a circumstance where a developer other than yourself working on one of your designs would lead to a better finished game? Because you said earlier, no, I'm now developing my own game, so basically not too many people are looking at it. So how do you see this?
Well, I think there's a lot of things with publishers that they're acting as developers, but they don't always take developer credit. So it's like a lot of these small publishers, the owner of the company is also maybe a designer. Maybe they've developed a bunch of other stuff like that. They know a lot of stuff. So there's a lot of listening to what they say. So, for instance, like my game Lions of Lydia, I
Hmm.
designed it and
Hmm.
developed it and made all the expansions. But Dennis Hoyle is also a great designer, and he's also made all of those games there. And he does art direction, he does the graphic design, he does the rules editing. He's so working with him was kind of like the thing. He's here, and I'm next in command, and we would just go through until all the ideas kind of clicked out, and then he would show it to his circle of people
Hmm.
and all that. I would show it to mine. We'd take collective feedback and bounce that off each other, try to come up with alternative ideas. And so I don't think I think if I became a self-publisher, I might end up in that weird vacuum where I'm just going with my own ideas and I might get blinded. But I do rely on the people internally in the companies, and I rely heavily on playtester feedback and stuff like that. I might think something's great, and if I see people just grinding the gears, not having fun with it, let's say kill your darlings.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to do that, and that
Yeah.
that shows itself very quickly in playtests, and playtests with other designers are always going to catch that stuff too. So I have a good circle of designers, and they're always like, hey, so um, yeah, I definitely don't want to go on and being an unchecked designer or an unchecked developer ever. But as far as needing to have another person, say, on payroll as another developer, that might be a bit much because you end up with that too many cooks in the kitchen, and you're not
Okay.
sure
Yeah.
where to leave room for the other guy, that sort of thing.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting. And you mentioned this very briefly, but you have a background in visual arts, music, and education, Johnny. Does this help you in designing and developing games? And if yes, in which way?
Yeah, I do think so. I think there's a lot of things in how. So I'm a musician, and a lot of my background is in jazz and improvised music, improvised rock music, and things like that. So, and it's structured improvisation. So I'm not like just getting blitzed and just trying to hope it sounds good. It's like I understand chord scale theory
Hmm.
and all sorts of things, like down to like a very very deep level. So that also comes with my background in education on music, because I was teaching for so long that I had to answer a lot of hard questions and understand how things are built. But what it comes down to is music is often needs, if you're playing it live, you need to play it in real time. And if you're in a studio recording, you need to still be able to play parts of it in real time and assemble it all together. And I think games have a live timing element to them. They have a tempo, they have a pace, they're draggy, they're
Hmm.
slow, and songs can be
Hmm.
played slower, faster, and different tempos. Different players in a different jazz group might accelerate everything and be loud and crazy, and or you could play the same song in a different environment and slow it down, drag it out. Um, so you get a lot of these scalable dynamics like that as far as length and tempo, and I think there's also something analogous, like if a musician stops playing a chord for a minute and the song stops, everybody turns their head up and they're kind of like, oh, okay, you got it, come on, count back in. And I feel like that happens if somebody leaves the table in the middle of a game because they need to go make a phone call, or if somebody's not paying attention, or if
Oh,
somebody's just
sorry.
having an analysis paralysis and they're
Mhm.
taking 3 times the length of everybody else at the table. It's kind of being a little, I don't know, tone deaf to the situation where in order for games to feel right, to sound good, they need to have that same, like, the tempo and momentum. It needs to start moving at that click. And
Yeah.
I think when you get a game going with people that are understanding the rules, and it's not always jumping on BGG last minute because of some terrible rule that's been put in there with no clarifications for the last 10 years being debated, you can get these games and they just flow. And I think that's important. Sort of like with music, you can get your song up there, and so you go play it, and it flows, and it feels really good, and everybody playing it, everybody listening to it has a good time. And so there's kind of that temporal thing, and I
Sorry.
also think,
Mhm.
oh, it's okay. Um, see where I was
So
coming
I
from.
interrupted you
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah,
with
I'm
this.
rambling,
So,
but yeah.
sorry for this, but I like this. I really like this because yes, I think at the table when we are playing a game, maybe again very soon with live people, there's a certain rhythm within the group, within the games, and I like this what you're describing here. That it's like something like music, and you are really an artist with so many crafts here, whereas I'm here totally uncreative. But at least I see what you're meaning. So, um, very interesting in my opinion. Um, and in 2019, Johnny, you designed Coloma, and this game has 1.4 thousand BGG ratings. I looked it up, so I'm prepared. But and this game obviously it has promo cards and it is popular. Why is there no German edition so far? Well, what is the reason?
There actually is a German edition. I think it was
Oh, I'm sorry. So I'm not prepared.
yeah. So it was let's see, gosh, they're a smaller publisher, and I'm actually they're the same publisher that has localized Final Frontier's other games, Robin Hood, and I think Rise to Nobility in that one. So
Oh,
so they did a small print run of it, and I think all the print runs are actually pretty small of it, and so it was one of those things where it's become hard to get very quickly. The game, I think, has kind of it's I think it's done well. It's got good critical acclaim and all that, and it's sold through its print run. I get emails like every week, when's the reprint? How can I get it? And it's going for lots of money on eBay. Um, but one of the hesitations with the publisher is that it's a game kind of based around groupthink. It was really one of those dynamic things. Sure, it's a Euro game, sure, with a Western theme and all this, but it's really the core mechanism is about this booming and busting. Me trying to think where you're going to go, so I don't go there, but I know that you know that, and we're trying to navigate this whole thing. And it also plays well up to it plays best, arguably, at higher player count. That's why it goes all the way to 6. It doesn't turn into a big slog because you don't have these long
yeah.
calculated turns. A lot of it's just, thinking what you
Boom.
do, decide on a dial, and go. And then with the pandemic situation, it made those sorts of games much harder to sell and move. And
Yeah.
people would often say, I've got the game, but I don't want to play it at lower player counts because I know it's going to do best at higher player counts. And the publisher has been aware of that. And I think that's been one of those things where, in a lot of ways, we've let the print run do its thing, and we've just been sitting, just waiting. And as things open up, as events open up, and all that, I think we're starting to talk about bringing it back, do another reprint, and trying to get it localized a little bit more.
Yeah,
So
yeah, but 1.4 K ratings is enormous if you are saying it's several smaller print runs. And Matthew is confirming that I'm unprepared because it's Taverna Ludica games. So
yeah,
this
yeah,
is
there it
the
is. Yep.
German localized edition. Thank you, Matthew. And there's another question from Jasper for you. What do you look for in a publisher to partner with? Is there something that you look for?
Well, right now, I mean, I collect games too and play a lot of games. So part of me is either certain publishers that I have a lot of their games on my shelf, and I've seen what they've done, and like their catalog is just amazing. And so there's a part of me that um, would love to, I don't know, see one of my games in their collection at some point, just because I admire their other games. But I don't necessarily know how they work internally at this point, if I haven't worked with them or know them. But some little things, it's like, the same publishers, Carcassonne and
Mm,
Stone Age and stuff like that. That would be like a major honor for me, since those games were so influential on
yeah.
my hobby and my craft.
Mm,
And other things like Queen games, that little yellow swish on the bottom of the box. It's kind of like, wouldn't that be amazing someday to have a
mm,
box with one of those little things? So there's little things like that I see, or the the little blue diamond on the corner of or triangle on the
Ravens.
corner of a Ravensburger box. Things
Mm,
like that are kind of there because I have such fond feelings about so many of the games that come out from
yeah.
those publishers, that I would be willing to investigate that. If a newer publisher, I'd say I don't know about, contacts me, I like to look at what their games are, if I've heard of them, or just talk to them and see what their aspirations are. Because sometimes I'm surprised. I was reached out to by a company recently that does a lot of IP stuff, and they've got movie
Mm,
IPs and things like that. And I tend to not really like. I love movies and things like that, but I don't really play a lot of games with IPs. So making one wasn't really something that I think a lot about. But when I was talking to them, I was like, well, what do you think? And they kind of approached it like, well, if you had a wish list of IPs, we might be able to get it. So why don't we ask you what game you would like to make with an
mm,
IP? And maybe we can go that route
mm,
versus somebody coming and saying, hey, we've got the
yeah.
Ghostbusters. You want to make a Ghostbusters game? I'm like, no.
Mm,
So this particular company, it's like I ended up saying I'm very interested because uh, I might be able to pick one of my favorite IPs, and they might be able to get it, and that's one of those very cool things. So I was actually pleasantly surprised with the how that conversation worked out. So I just think being open and talking about what their aspirations are. Some small companies that do, like, we do one game a year and we put all of our eggs in that
yeah.
basket. That's really cool too, because they care that much about it versus a company that makes a lot of great games, but they shotgun blast the market with them, and some of them are just bound to fall, and they only support the ones that don't, or do. Sorry.
Mm,
So you always look at the odds and go like, well, cool, I could be one of their hits, but I could also be one of their misses. And if it's a miss, it's said and done,
yeah.
right? So.
Yeah, right. And because when I thought about when I thought that Coloma did not have a German edition, I thought about the topic, the theme, and Matthew is saying, funny talking about this. We never were able to localize Pioneer Days, sorry, another
Hmm.
Western themed game in German. Yeah, these games aren't that popular over here. So it is what it is. And Matthew is also saying, really love Hans im Glück, but I have to say they really take far too long to consider prototypes, sadly. Yeah,
Yeah, I've
and
sent them a couple of them. It takes a very, very long time.
yeah, right. I've heard this from several people and friends. And but Matthew is saying I want a Johnny Pack and Keymaster games combo. So you see
Oh my gosh,
what you need
yeah.
to do next. It's already decided.
Yeah, well,
It,
I am working with Henry Audubon on a project that's not Keymaster related. So that's he's the author of the game Parks and all that. So we're working on a little project that's I'll just be doing some development for. He's taking the lead design on the project. But yeah, so I don't know them directly yet, but they make some beautiful stuff, and his designs especially, I think, are just
yeah.
really, really incredible.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And um, speaking about future titles from you, Johnny, is there anything that you'd like to mention if you can?
Yeah, I could go. So the just a quick run over the. Hopefully, we'll see a reprint of Coloma, and if it does get reprinted, it's going to be those things where we will add some stuff to it. So it'd be likely like an expansion plus reprint sort of thing, if that works out. The Endless Winter is being sent to production very soon, and so
Hmm.
that game is something. Of course, I worked a lot on the core, but the expansions were stuff I had a primary role in. So that's a lot of stuff there. That's I'm proud of as far as that one goes. I'm looking forward to people seeing those. As far as other stuff comes down, the Fantasia, who did Endless Winter's next game, is called Unconscious Mind, and it's about kind of like the era
Hmm.
of Freud and
Hmm.
psychoanalysis and all that. And it has artwork by Vincent Dutrait and Andrew Bosley there
Very
together,
nice. Hmm.
which is kind of this crazy thing because Vincent does all of his work by hand, like, and
Hmm.
then Bosley is digital and all this stuff, and they have
Hmm.
slightly different styles. well, very different styles. And the publishers decided to leverage that on purpose to kind of create the internal state, the mind, the dreams, and all that is really going to be Bosley's artwork. And then the real world, the people of Vienna and all this stuff will be drawn by Vincent. So it's kind of a neat amalgam of where that art ends and begins, and where parts of the design should feel distinct, that this is the internal landscape and the external, and how those are going to affect gameplay at the same time. So I'm pretty excited about working on that one. We're going into the heavier development period this summer. As soon as Endless Winter is off to the printer, we can take the whole full team and just drop it over and pick that up.
Very
And
good.
then yeah, so then I have a couple other projects lined up with the same with those guys basically out for the next couple years, of various sizes. Some stuff I'm developing, some stuff I'm authoring, and a few things in between. So we'll definitely be rolling out, BGG pages and making little Facebook groups like that. We're very kind of open about the working process. We invite people to come in and look at the rule book. Here's version 10 of it, and we get 100 comments, and we'll listen to every one of them. So that's kind of how we work. So it's when the time's right. We're not going to like do we're not holding things behind the curtain so much. It's like as it's being made, we show everything that comes out.
And there is another question for you from Jay Foolsgard. Is there any tools, approaches for development you would recommend for designers to use? Any tools, any approaches? How do you approach development?
Yeah, so I mean, not to get crazy into the technical side, like as far as software and things like that. But as far as creative tools, it's probably good to have a comprehensive knowledge of mechanics and what's been done. And so, like Jeff Engelstein's book with Isaac Shalev on game mechanics, stuff like that. It's really good to know about it. And they reference a lot of games that exemplify those mechanics in ways. It's probably good to understand how those work, understand things like scaling. How does this game work at higher player counts, lower player counts? What have people done in the past to make that work? Which things need a lot of heavy-handed work to make it scale? Which things just openly expand and contract? End game scenarios. Sometimes it's like knowing when it's a good game, but it goes 3 hours. How do you make that game fit in 60
4
minutes?
hours.
Yeah, exactly. And so looking at endgame scenarios, sometimes it's going to be little things like people are going to say, "Oh, I think the start player has an advantage," and you have to look at how do you, bid for turn order? How do you compensate those things? Does there need to be compensation? Some people say, "Oh, we need a catch-up mechanism," or does it? Is there a countervailing force where the game automatically does that? Is there a way to that when people pull ahead, can other players, not trade with them, not bid with them? Is it handled by the players, or does it need to be handled by the game or the design? So looking at a lot of kind of like broader dynamics is important to see how that fits. And then you'll also end up in this case a lot of times where publishers sign something and it's of one scope and size, but they want to position the product at another. So this is a cool little game. We want to make it into a big Kickstarter. And so anything we can deluxify, what can be metal, what can be made out of resin, what can be triple size, what can have, dual layer player boards, and try to brainstorm excuses, reasons to make this thing as crazy as you can. And then on the opposite spectrum, you might get this sprawling game that has something that the publisher likes, but they say, by the way, we want to make this $25 MSRP and we want it to fit in a shoebox. It's like, a little, and all of a sudden you have to cut as much as you possibly can, but retain as much as the feel of the bigger game as possible. So it's like, oh gosh, there's, 70 something tiles. Could those be cards? Would that make it worse? Trying things like that to make it fit the footprint but still have the feel. That's a lot of stuff you end up doing as well.
Yeah, and from my point of view, and you already said so, it's also knowing the publisher. If you are already at that stage that you would like to pitch it to one, two, three, four publishers, you should know their expectations, and of course, watch the market. That's always important. And yeah, Jonny, and for people, and you mentioned this also a little bit earlier, if people want to know even more about Jonny, you should listen to that episode that you mentioned of 5 Games for Doomsday by this troublemaker Ben Maddox. He really is, but he's also a very good person and a very good interviewer. And I think
Yeah.
that episode with Jonny is particularly interesting. So you should listen to it, and you will find it at 5Games for Doomsday, I think, .com. You will easily find it. And if publishers are seeing this, if publishers are viewing this, please get in touch with Jonny, because Jonny is doing this, as he mentioned, full time. So if you are in need of a great designer, of a great developer, please get in touch. I posted the web page, so the URL, so you'll find Jonny. But what is a good way, apart from that web page, to reach you? If people want to reach you, how should they do this?
Oh, Twitter's easy. Easy to look up there. I'm active on Facebook, so I use both those regularly. So it's really easy to get hold of me. I try to answer everybody within a day or so, if not right away. So yeah, it's you don't have to go through. You don't have to have your people contact my people. You can just contact me, and we're good. So it's easy. Or you can email me at jonnypac at gmail.com. So JONNYPAC at gmail, and I'll always read that too.
Very good. So, Jonny, it was really a pleasure having you here. And thank you very much for your time. And also thank you for your time watching. Next week, it will be a boring episode with just me presenting Spielworxx and industry news. So, if you would like to talk about a topic in advance or have a question that you'd like to ask in advance for a future episode, please drop me an email at uli@spielworxx.de. That is uli@spielworxx.de. And again, thank you for your time. Till next week, bleibt alle gesund. Black Lives Matter. Bye bye. Bye.
See you later.